ways. Harm reduction's quiet, advocate bold, turning research to breaches to stories retold. Not denial, not judgment, just evidence pure. I call her tomorrow, she has to ensure.
Good morning, friends. It's Jim McCarthy with American Vapor Manufacturers, back for another installment of Shaping Vaping, our podcast on nicotine and THR policy. Joined as always by Joe Gitchell and Pinion Associates, and delighted, thrilled, overjoyed to have with us today Arielle Selya, one of the sharpest, most astute thinkers in our space. Arielle, thank you for joining us. Do you recognize the opening track?
I sure do.
Joe, did you recognize the opening track?
That's the first time I've heard it, but it feels like it's an Arielle theme song.
You're correct. That's by DJ Dr Woof. That's a musical tribute to Arielle's research. And we'll put the link in the chat. I expect that to go viral imminently. It's fantastic. I call that proto dance pop track. So the lyrics are incredible too.
Yeah, they are. What a world we live in.
It's fantastic.
You can just generate something like that in 2 minutes.
It's really, really good. We've got a lot to get to today, friends. And Arielle's got to stop at 12:45, but we'll get a lot packed in there. In the meantime, we're going to talk a little bit about the GFN Warsaw conference, in which Arielle presented, among other things, on ethics in nicotine policy, which I think is a crucial topic. We're also going to talk about the new National Youth Tobacco Survey numbers. Were those authored, I believe, by a mall police officer in Sarasota, Florida? Is that right?
Hey, Jim.
Yes.
Inspired by my attending this Aspen Ideas Health Conference. I'm currently in the Denver International Airport. And I talked to a really wise person there, and she was talking about an example where they had a contentious debate that they hosted, but it was marked by people being, quote, hard on ideas, but soft on people. And I doubt this intervention is going to have a meaningful impact on your instincts. But I'm asking all of us to try to cling to being hard on ideas, but soft on people. So I'm going to call you on your kind of your indulgence into mall cops and that sort of stuff.
Okay.
So let's focus on the substance, the evidence, and the implications. And Arielle is a very strong model of doing that. So let's, be like Arielle.
That's the reason she gets dance tracks written about her, and I do not.
So thank you for hearing me out on.
I'm always keen to learn from the wise people at the Aspen Ideas Festival, and the reason I make that sarcastic jibe is because the recently ousted commissioner of the Food and Drug Administration, Dr. Marty McCary, slow walked the release of these National Youth Tobacco Survey numbers because he said the numbers were unreliable. And the reason he knew that was because he had spoken to a security officer in the great state of Florida who told him that the numbers were not reliable. And so, again, I try to follow your advice, Joe, to listen to FDA leadership and believe in their mission and walk with them as we build the mountain of knowledge. And that's the direction that Dr. McCary walked me in. So I thank you for correcting me. Turns out mall cops are not reliable sources of this data, honestly. But we're going to talk about that and in a peaceful, harmonious way, if I can muster it. And we're also going to talk about a new paper that Arielle has out that is getting a lot of good attention in our space. So let's dive right into that. I want to start with your new paper, Arielle, which got covered in, drumroll please, The Lancet, the most prestigious publication in medical research. What?
Yeah. So it actually cited my Substack, which is a first. I was not expecting my Substack to make it into the scientific literature, but it's exciting. I'll take it.
Yeah,
I'm not being cited very often these days.
It's fantastic. Well, I wanted to sort of highlight the key section, but I'll try to pull it out here. It says here that Smoking prevalence declined rapidly, coinciding with increased uptake of vaping following regulatory clarification. Oh my God, we need Sheriff Bell here to help us with this. Arielle, could you
have Arielle?
Yeah, so
summarize the findings for me, please?
Yeah, so what that means is that the regulatory clarification refers to, it was ambiguous at first how e-cigarettes were regulated in New Zealand. And that's what they attribute a spike to. So similar to the US, where we had the peak of youth vaping in 2019, New Zealand also showed a peak that among youth that declined quite quickly afterwards. And perhaps whether that's due to, so whether that's, nobody will ever really know whether that's due to policy or whether it was just a passing fad. Probably in reality, it's a little bit of both. But essentially this Lancet paper is looking at adults and finding that in the pre-period before widespread uptake of e-cigarettes, it was kind of a flat decline, like smoking prevalence was declining.
Is that in the gray area?
In the gray area, correct. Yeah, so this is what was achieved by traditional tobacco control measures. And they were effective, they were having some success, but it was kind of diminishing returns, especially as we get to low prevalence and you get the people that really are not receptive to those kinds of measures. But lo and behold, in the green era, after e-cigarettes started being taken up on a common basis, suddenly you see a statistically significant and large increase in the decline.
Right, from which we can deduce that smoking or vaping accelerated that decline.
Yeah, it's a supporting piece of evidence. It doesn't show it conclusively because you can have spurious correlations by plotting one time series against another for all sorts of silly reasons, but e-cigarettes are an obvious explanation given a lot of other evidence that they're economic substitutes for cigarettes and given the diminishing returns of traditional tobacco control measures, which can kind of be ruled out.
And fair to say, these are pretty striking results. I mean, if it got picked up in the Lancet, I mean, we can also deduce subjectively that this is a big deal and that it deserves a lot of attention. Your phone must be ringing off the hook with calls from the New York Times and Reuters and Associated Press and all of the authors that cover this space and the journalism who are always keen to highlight the most prominent studies. Have you been fielding calls all week?
No, not by the New York Times, but definitely by the vaping community.
No one named
Let's keep the provenance clear. Arielle is wonderful.
Yeah.
She explained this super clearly to us, but she's not an author on the paper you just showed.
Okay.
The authors
she's cited.
She is cited. What her work is cited by those authors to provide evidence to support one of their points.
Right.
But it would be extreme for any reporter to reach out to someone cited in a paper unless it was the most controversial point of the paper. What is interesting is, does this piece in the Lancet, a regional journal, not the Lancet, but a Lancet family journal.
All right.
People should be curious. It's like how, Clive and Dave Sweener will say the skies over Japan should be completely overshadowed by flights of tobacco control researchers coming in to see how did they reduce cigarette consumption by almost half in 10 years. And the kind of curiosity that we are trying to instill is a critical piece of this puzzle.
Well, I'm reminded, Joe, I'm surprised to hear you say that because I'm reminded of about, 6 weeks ago when a paper came out of this same region of the world. This was Lancet, in the Pacific region. A similar paper came out in that same part of the world that was splashed all over front pages, all over the world. And oh, by the way, it wasn't just the authors who were quoted. It was all kinds of cherry-picked tobacco control zealots who were included in the coverage.
So that I think you're referring to the paper where the senior author was
the bunk cancer paper. Yes.
It was published in Carcinogenesis. I don't think it was I don't know if that's a Lancet journal. And yes, but you are a student of the way journalism works, and a frightening story is much more relevant. We have negativity bias, so that's much more likely to gain traction than, wow, something's working. Isn't this encouraging to hear? I'm not saying that's the only thing that explains it. I'm saying that's an important distinction to make.
I'm not so sure that that's quite right either. I mean, perhaps as a majority, but there's plenty of stories about breakthrough. I mean, hell's bells, you guys working in the pharma space, stories about new pharmaceutical therapies that are going to one day cure a particular malady are routinely played up in the press. In fact, I think there's even a bias they have that where they overstate the possibilities or are overly optimistic about the outcomes. Here we have a paper that shows an incredibly optimistic, tangible, not prospective, actual positive health outcome for the number one public preventable cause of preventable death, the highest priority in public health.
So, Jim,
by that rubric, it deserves coverage, I think.
That a very fair point, and so let's do what we can to help with that.
Well, I'll show you one
early in the news cycle.
Here's one outlet that did cover it. Clearing the air.
Well, no, wait. I'm
Different
trying
paper
to be
again.
on this.
Oh, forgive me. Forgive me. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, but we're now shifting from New Zealand. And people should read the Beaglehole, Bonita, and Yowden paper. But then now we're moving to the United States.
Okay.
In this one, Arielle is an author. So
okay, this is a study that Arielle wrote, which was covered in clearingtheair.eu, and it finds that exclusive cigarette smoking fell sharply among U.S. adults who used cigarettes or vapes between 2014 and 2024. It's right in the headline. U.S. adults are moving from smoking to vaping. U.S. studies.
That's the basic story. And one of the most remarkable things that that stood out to me when I saw the first round of results that we did was that overall use of either product was remarkably stable. So around 16 to 17%, maybe slightly declining, but more or less stable, which suggests to me that there's a stable percentage of the US population that has a demand for nicotine. But underneath that top layer, there's drastic shifts. Smoking declined drastically, overtaken by vaping. And how to interpret this is tricky. There's still a lot of papers that I see that present it as, oh, smoking was declining anyway. Kind of like the Beaglehole, the corresponding commentary to that by Bloom et al.
Well, the Beaglehole paper gives a lot of credit to the World Health Organization and FCTC
and the Empower program.
It gives a lot of credit to the Empower program. And in fact, I think it argues that or suggests that harm reduction approach ought to somehow be dovetailed with the Empower FCTC. So I don't know. We don't have to dive down the rabbit hole necessarily, but I was, I spit my coffee when I read that part.
I mean, the takeaway to me was that they're acknowledging, because the critics on the other side who see a trend like that, even with my paper, they're going to look at it and they're going to say, oh, cigarette smoking was already declining, but the increase of vaping is undermining that goal. It's setting us back. They don't realize, or they don't allow the possibility that vaping is causing the decline in smoking. Right. So the reference to the FCTC, I took as, yes, traditional tobacco control measures did have an effect at one time. It's diminishing over time. They even say in the Beaglehole paper that if the current rate of decline, like pre-e-cigarette era, if that rate of decline had continued, it would take several more decades to achieve the smoke-free goal.
I mean, there's also, if I may suggest, a qualitative distinction between the vaping THR approach and the Empower approach, because the Empower approach is entirely based on coercion. They are putting their measures in place, taxation, criminal law, fines, enforcement, all incentives galore about where you are forbidden from using these products. It's all about control and coercion, whereas the harm reduction approach is enabling the actual people that we're trying to help here, smokers like myself, to take agency and take control of their own destiny, choose what works best for them, modify it as they sort through their preferences, and do it with their own two hands in a free market. And that to me is a gigantic ethical distinction. I mean, we'll move to ethics in a minute, but that's huge, I think.
I completely agree with you, but I think as far as engaging with dialogue with the other side, you have to acknowledge that some of the declines were due to policy. Otherwise, it's an easy way for them to completely dismiss what they're saying, which they'll probably do anyway.
Surprise, surprise, when you point a gun at someone and you lock them in handcuffs, it's harder for them to do behavior X, but that doesn't get us any closer to a just and moral society that we'd all wish to live in. Quite the opposite. I mean, I think the great example that Ethan Nadelman points out all the time that is so striking to me is that there is prevalent heroin use on death row, among death row inmates in the United States. I mean, you could not set up or build or contrive a more controlled, coercive atmosphere than being on death row. And yet the federal government, state governments are with armed guards present and like watching them in a closed box 24/7 are unable to prevent those individuals from using heroin. Do you see what I'm getting at? Like, yes, you can constrict them more and more. We could turn into the North Korea of behavior X, but it's still.
I agree with you. There's a big moral distinction, and I'm with you on the moral side. But there's a difference between academically saying yes, increased taxes had a limited effect on suppressing demand. There's a difference between acknowledging that it had an effect and endorsing that approach.
Yeah,
and I can't help. Hey, so I'm going to cut you guys off because we got to move on, and I get to brag about my Raygun T-shirt today, which is the Ehrlichman quote. Is it showing up?
Is that the one, grab them by the X and their hearts and minds?
No, it's like, did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did.
Oh, sure. Well, I mean, yeah, Richard Nixon was the author of the war on drugs. Yes, good point. I quite agree. Despite the fact that John Ehrlichman is one of my intellectual heroes. Oh, no. We have the first face cover of the show. We have the first face cover. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about ethics because you presented on that, Arielle, in the quick question. Did any other news outlets besides Clearing the Air wish to cover your study? Let's just get that on record.
Not news outlets, but my Substack has been getting. I have like the stats on on my account. That is the most viewed Substack ever. And like Joe mentions, I'm always trying to figure out like what kind of posts do I make get higher reach and which are more successful.
Yeah.
Joe just mentioned that, like the pessimism bias. But this goes against. This is the second example of like a really, I guess not really viral, but as far as Substack goes, viral post that is positive. Like it has a positive optimism bias. So that's an interesting data point that went against what I expected.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the real acid tests for me in recognizing slanted, biased media coverage is that by concealing or omitting key aspects of a public issue or debate, they're actually making the article and the coverage less interesting, less compelling, less intellectually appealing. I mean, who wants to, would you rather watch a baseball scrimmage where the Mets are just doing batting practice, or would you rather watch them play the Yankees? I mean, the point is, this is a robust, important, very, very interesting debate that's happening in our public discourse. And yet to read, New York Times or the Associated Press or Reuters or NPR, you'd be oblivious to, the entire other side, the prevailing side of that discourse. And that to me is so revealing. They would rather cut their nose to spite their face, and it's disappointing and disturbing and revealing. But let's transition a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about the Global Forum on Nicotine, which met in Warsaw recently. I think you both went to that. Is that right? Arielle, I know you were there.
Sorry, Arielle was there in force. and I would have just been there clapping.
You guys are
Lynn Dawkins as well. She was the other Kinney rep.
I mean, much praise to both you guys for all the travel and the miles that you logged going to these conferences. There wasn't enough whiskey in Ireland to get me on a flight to Warsaw, Poland. I took the Long Island Railroad out to the Hamptons last week and was like crying my eyes out with despair.
Well, I lived out in the Dakotas where like a 3-day drive is like reasonable.
Right. It's like, you're reminding me when I lived in Carbon County, Wyoming. It was like that.
Yeah.
But let's talk a little bit about the topic was about ethics in nicotine policy, I guess broadly speaking. And there's a lot to cover. There's an 2-hour YouTube of the whole presentation, which I highly commend, and we'll put in the thread for people to watch as a whole. But one slide that really jumped out to me, Arielle, was this one that you had in your talk, and it's a flow chart that seeks to map the various incentives and the ways in which research in this area, gets overseen, funded, and I guess shepherded into publication. And
so this was actually, if you like this slide, sorry to interrupt you mid-sentence.
Please.
Go back to my Michael Russell oration from last year, just GFN. I explained the whole system here. So it's from like 10 years of being in the system.
Right.
It starts with like a production mill of PhDs, essentially, that loop down in the lower left-hand corner. Yeah. Where PhDs are essentially treated as cheap labor. There's too many of them for the available academic positions, and that leads to a cycle of vicious competition. And how does a university choose? What basis do they use to choose between many, many highly qualified candidates? They're going to use the one that benefits them, which is indirect money and grant funding. So that has it started out as like a perk, something that makes you more attractive, something that gets you favorable reviews and that sort of thing. But then it slowly became strongly encouraged, and now in many places required that even as a junior faculty member, you have to come in with grant funding. And what happens is that when virtually all of the grant funders have the same attitude on a topic, that influences who gets grants. It's a survival thing. The faculty members that don't hold that opinion or that are not willing to conform don't survive in academia.
You guys live in this world, and but I have to say, as a layperson, as an outsider, and I think a view that's shared by a lot of other just ordinary people that are affected by policy in this space, I have to say this is really horrifying. I mean, this is not even remotely close to what the scientific method ought to be, or academic freedom ought to be, or the way that I think ordinary Americans expect our research institutions to operate. I mean, from where I sit, this is just a completely polluted structure that has been obviously hijacked by ideological actors to the enormous detriment of ordinary Americans. I mean, the papers that result from this are what's fueling all the hysterical news coverage and the policies that are wreaking so much harm. I mean, I look at this chart and I feel like my hair is going to turn white. It's so disturbing.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's a big problem, and it's not at all how science is supposed to act, or the academic freedom is not really complete in that sense, because the questions, you need resources to do research, and the funders determine which questions are even worth being asked. When I was a naive junior faculty member, I had never heard anything positive about e-cigarettes until I kind of like stumbled on it myself with my own analysis. Like it's so insulated of a bubble. And that's why I have some sympathy for the people stuck in this system, because I don't think they're evil. I don't think they're trying to kill people with cigarettes. I think they're really just naive. It's hard for a non-academic sometimes to understand just how insulated that bubble is.
Joe, did you notice how calmly I posed that question to Arielle and the aspen tone of voice I used?
That was good.
Jim, so men, I learned this on some podcast talking about the effects of testosterone. I'm not going to be able to remember what it was. But the point is, men are relatively more responsive to positive reinforcement than punishment. So, Jim, thank you for your measured and thoughtful questions to Arielle. And I think what Arielle is highlighting here is that it is a nested set of incentives that are detrimental to reliable knowledge generation. And that's what needs to be improved and hopefully can be.
Yes, I'll try to muster. I'll try to ask our friend of the show, Sheriff Ed Tom Bell, to put that in layman's terms for a local Texas bar when the show is over, because I would use adjectives left to my own devices that are a lot more stringent than those. All right, I'm going to abandon my NPR voice because I want to get to another slide here. One of your co-presenters, Arielle, was Dr. Jean-Francois Etter, from professor at the prestigious University of Geneva in Switzerland. And this, he had a slide here. There's a lot of aspects about the ethics in nicotine policy, but this is one that really jumped out at me, which is about how all of these various policies we see within the Empower scheme or FDA tobacco's approach, or the prohibition model to varying degrees, is the way that it stifles innovation. And I think a corollary to this is, the people that could have switched, were they not deterred, disincentivized, punished, deceived? So but the products themselves and the potential of the market to present more appealing, effective products to maximize the rates at which people switch, that's being capped and throttled. And so too is the ability and wherewithal of the consumers to seek out and adopt these products. And I think that's a huge hidden cost, a kind of concealed, potential that is, again, just morally horrifying, and is rarely talked about. I mean, not only does FDA, for example, never talk about the harm it does to the businesses and manufacturers, can't spare a syllable for the hardship that they impose on people, never mind what they're doing to the consumers. But they insist, oh, we're here to help innovation, don't you know? We're interested in fostering innovation. And it just is like this, it's this absolute Alice in Wonderland view. I mean, I don't know, your thoughts on Professor Etter's point here.
I think he had a 100% like A plus on his presentation. Everybody should watch it. It's definitely this slide. I agree with this. And I'm going to take this opportunity to put a Dune quote in, which I might have quoted in my Michael Russell oration last year. Bureaucracy destroys initiative. There is little that bureaucrats hate more than innovation, especially innovation that produces better results than the old routines. Improvements always make those at the top of the heap look inept. Who enjoys appearing inept?
That is right. Yeah, much praise. That's exactly right. And I think this gets back to the ethical problem that Joe and I try to grapple with a lot, which is once you open that Pandora's box to state capacity, as Joe likes to put it, you unleash all of these monsters. All the incentives the perverse incentives we just talked about in academia, where funders are able to throttle and control and corrupt that entire process. That's a hugely important field in our society. It's been completely strangled. The smokers that are left bereft of choices, the regulators, they're making up the rules behind the door. All these demons are unleashed. The press coverage that allows ideological slant to run wild, scare the daylights out of ordinary Americans. These are all monsters that are flying out of that box. And we can grapple with, as you did, I think, quite compellingly in Poland, with the ethics of particular slices of this, but it all derives, I think, from abandonment of the fundamental ethical principle that ordinary individuals have a right, a moral right, a human right to control their own destinies and have bodily autonomy and make choices about their own well-being. And when you surrender that over to the state, you say, okay, state capacity, let's get smarter with our friends at the FDA. That Pandora's box it flies out all kinds of demons and phantasms that cannot be foreseen, cannot be controlled, and it's extremely difficult to ever put back in that box. And that, to me, is the core moral dilemma.
I agree.
Yeah,
even when I was in academia, I always thought, well, what if somebody decides they really need to smoke for their own quality of life? Like, who is a bureaucrat or a public health person to decide that? Like, I always kind of thought the job of public health should end with correctly educating people. As long as people have informed consent, I think they should be able to make their own decisions. And I talked about the kind of slippery slope in the same session with Jean-Francois, where I put it on. So the theme of the conference was prohibition, and a lot of the presentations were around that, and talked about ethics and prohibition. And a lot of most of the work that I do isn't on strict prohibition, but I presented it as kind of a continuum where if you're focused on the harm mindset because of which starts with the funders' incentives, the whole research organization is based on finding harms of e-cigarettes. And then that it's a self-perpetuating cycle, because then you have the literature is full of papers focusing on harm and not looking at harm reduction. And inevitably, all the papers have to conclude about a public health relevance. And this goes into grant funding too. You have to have a small section on public health relevance of your research when you propose. And inevitably it's about policy. Like almost all papers I read are about policy. And when some policy doesn't work, you see it with the flavor bans in California. Oh, we banned flavors. That didn't work. 80% of kids are still accessing flavors before and after. We need more enforcement. So it gets stricter and stricter, and it goes down the continuum of prohibition. Like not for every researcher. I'm not saying everybody that supports taxes supports full prohibition, but as a field, it's going in that direction.
I mean, Joe, let me give you a viewpoint on this that will please the sensibilities of the politics and prose crowd. This is hugely anti-democratic. This tramples on the democratic values every politics and prose customer holds dear. You know why? Because Dr. Tedros no one voted for that guy. Okay. The Empower scheme was devised in a boardroom at Bloomberg Philanthropies, one of the top 10 richest guys in the world, a billionaire who you and the Bernie crowd supposedly, disdains. All of these, the academia, the academic world that Arielle just described, the funders there are, again, coming from those deep pocket elite billionaires who swan around in Aspen on their Gulfstream 5s. You're
getting closer to not so soft.
The point is, all of this is anti-democratic. It's being run by the wealthiest people in the world without any accountability. No one voted for Empower WHO, and it ought to, I think, offend the sensibilities of anyone who believes in robust democracy.
So let's start with where I think we might agree. Markets are a wonderful thing in terms of meeting supply and demand as efficiently as possible. Markets do not always function perfectly, and sometimes those imperfections lead to costs borne by consumers. The nicotine market is riven with market failure, and we don't have time to even touch on all that. But you're willing to accept that nicotine market is riven by market failure, then the question is, what do you do about it? And that's where state capacity comes in. So your ideological starting place is not prepared to take that step with, so the answer to market failure is state capacity. Mine is, and in a lot of domains, that's already happened. So having the philosophical, ideological debate about the justice, morality of imposing that is kind of moot when it's already in place in so many places. So then what I focus on is how do we actually get that state capacity to improve public welfare? And the tension there is in too many places, it is not based on evidence as we best understand it. The beacon of light that came out of South Africa overnight, I don't know if you've seen this, Jim. You will need to be slightly sedated and definitely sitting down. Where, based on advocacy from like Kurt Yo and other consumers, from global experts, a panel of the South African Parliament reviewing legislation that had been essentially at the deep end of Arielle's continuing prohibition, was like, that doesn't make sense. We need to treat these products differently because they present very different risks, and we need to regulate proportionally. That is a big deal. As South Africa has, that is like, they just flew across a lot of distance to come down there. I'll find the link and put it in. It is nuts.
I'll believe when I see it. And no government's been more captured by Bloomberg and WHO and Dr. Tedros than South Africa, which to begin with is a maniacal Marxist basket case state. So I'll believe it when I see it in action. But it sounds encouraging. But to touch on your point,
no, just and to your point, this is merely the findings of a parliamentary committee. It is not law. But the point is, even that step is unprecedented and worthy of note. So I'll put the link into the media statement.
Well, okay. But meanwhile, Dr. Tedros still has his hands around the throat of that country. Sorry, we lost you on.
No. I'm trying because I'm in the. We're not going to fix it.
I'm glad some parliamentarians.
We're not going to fix it in 7 hours, Jim. We're not going to fix it in 7 hours.
All right. Well, let's talk about a slide that you. Well, hang on. Let me before we get to that.
And you better use Arielle's remaining minutes wisely. I'm trying to be quiet.
7 minutes.
That's why I'm saving your slide till after that. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about. You've been flagging a lot of retractions that have occurred in the academic literature lately, Arielle, and this is a good example, I think, of one corrective aspect toward one of the many demons, goblins, and phantasms that popped out of the Pandora's box that we've opened. But what is striking to me is, this was a paper that was just thoroughly debunked, and the authors didn't care. That's what struck me. Like if you guys or academics that I know had a paper retracted in that punishing a fashion with the backboard shatter and the pieces falling on their head, like I'd have something to say about it, to try to like mop up my integrity a little bit, or at least,
Yeah, we essentially wrote back an entire new paper to the editor for our retraction.
Right.
Justifying the original. Yeah. And this is from a paper mill. So this is a second retraction from the same research group. The first one was on NHANES, looking at e-cigarettes and stroke. That was retracted first because there were glaring issues at every stage, including like they couldn't even import the data correctly and count the number of participants. They were off by a factor of 10 in what they reported. So Flo Foxon and Gal Cohen went after that paper pretty hard, especially once they found out that it was a paper mill and that the author was claiming fraudulent affiliations. In my experience, it's like I do this stuff when I can, but editors don't usually care, in my experience, about methodological issues because they seem.
Could you say that again, please? Editors don't care about methodological issues?
Often not. One response from an editor was that we don't care if it's only one flaw. Like no matter how important, if it's only one flaw, then we're not going to publish your criticism. And more often, I don't even get a response. It's just like in my experience, it seems like they consider it a statistical judgment call. But where they do start caring is if it gets into ethical misconduct, like fraudulent affiliations or paper mill. So I think that's why the first paper on stroke was successfully retracted. And then Gal Cohen has been following up other publications from the same author, same group.
Right. And then this is I think were they the authors that had another retraction? There's some authors in the last week had their second retraction of the year, which is why I put up the I like to put up the graphic of the guy singing, "We're going to do it anyway." It's the ethos of tobacco control academic research. They seem impervious.
Yeah.
What you have up now is yet another.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, Arielle.
Hard on evidence and arguments and ideas. Soft.
Here's the question I wish to understand. Despite the fact that these authors are getting the backboard shattered on them and their credibility smashed into a million pieces, they come out with another study that does the exact same thing without ever accounting for the first one. I mean,
this is a different. What you have up on the screen is different, but
right, this is the one where they induce seizures in
mice. Yeah. No, okay, seizures in mice is a different group.
Well, but you see, this is the point I'm making.
Yeah.
Like in this world of tobacco control research, because of the incentives that you so artfully mapped out, they continue to do it with impunity. Is that fair to say, Joe?
I go back to the flow chart of incentives. And the problem is until the incentives meaningfully change, it's not really that germane who the people are within those cogs and wheels.
I think we're harmonizing here. Yes, until that system is somehow confronted and dismantled, quote, they're going to do it anyway. Like I don't think I'm going too far there. And I also want to flag the youth. We talked about the youth tobacco SIRS. Yeah, let's just flag a little bit about FDA's. If this is the chart that you retweeted from FDA tobacco, where it shows tobacco use declined. And I guess I don't know. I'd be keen for your thoughts, but in particular, it troubles me how the way that they frame the chart. So, they don't show the rest of which axis is the one that goes up? Is that the x-axis? The x-axis, the y-axis? The y-axis it starts at 12. So it's as if everyone's doing it when in fact it's already negligible to begin with. It's just so dishonest.
Okay, fair enough. But this is a market improvement over previous communications for a couple of main reasons. One is that they actually show the decline over time. And two is they present all data points on the same scale. They don't switch back and forth between percentages and raw numbers to obscure the decline.
All right. Well,
so this is not so bad. The ironic thing to me about the NHIS 2025 release is that there were so many disruptions to the process that they released the raw data first before releasing their own official report, which left it to Altria was the first one to get out a detailed summary of that.
Well, let's just go back to let's transport back to Warsaw for a second. It was the last slide. I know you got to go in a second here, Arielle, but this is a slide from your deck. Yes. Which shows something that FDA is doing at the same time. Okay. At the same time, they're putting out those numbers and maybe getting incrementally better in the way that they're, slightly, their dishonesty is diminishing a little bit. Here they are. This is a $1 billion nationwide ad campaign in which they're exposing youth to these products who would otherwise be naive. I mean, it's incredible. And there's the part that troubles me the most is in all of these ethical aspects, there's no grappling with any of this. They never attempt to even entertain or answer or justify the legitimate ethical concerns that are raised. In this case, incentivizing young people to use nicotine products.
Yeah, and there are some papers showing that the valence of so there's a ton of papers every week on self-reported exposure to vaping content online. And very few studies look at the valence of that content, whether it's anti-vaping ads or pro-vaping content or marketing. But one study did, and it found the same direction of effects regardless of the valence of the ad. So in other words, it's kind of an unresolved question in my mind because there's methodological issues with these studies. Is it the youth that well, let me back up. The way this is usually interpreted with vaping exposure online is that naive kids are going online and stumbling across vaping ads, and then that makes them interested in vaping. But with social media, there's a reverse causality, right? Because you don't go on social media just kind of willy-nilly. You have an account, you search for things that you're already interested in. So how do we know these results aren't explained by just the kids who are interested in seeking out that kind of content? So setting that aside, if it is causal, which is a big leap for the sake of argument, it seems to not matter whether it's anti-vaping or pro-vaping. Like any sort of self-reported vaping exposure is correlated with higher rates of use.
Fair enough. And I think that's very insightful. And I think the point that jumps out at me is that in none of the tobacco control studies that were looked at here include, none of them include any meaningful discussion of the ethics of exposing nicotine naive youth to e-cigarette market. I mean, like, what the hell? So in other words, if FDA is putting out $1 billion ad campaign telling kids vaping is dangerous, so many of your friends are doing it, it's illicit, splashy graphics, catchy, eye-catching, appealing. And the effect of that could be to induce the kids to think, oh gosh, something transgressive, I'm going to give that a shot. I mean, a well-understood phenomenon.
Right, back to the DARE program, right?
Yes.
Yep.
So speaking of inducing in kids, Arielle is leaving.
Arielle's going to do something much more important than this, which is involves a water slide park, and she can maybe tell us about it after the event.
Yes.
Arielle, thank you for joining us. Let's make it to be continued because we don't never seem to have enough time for all we want to talk about with you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I hope to be back on soon. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Arielle. Soon. Joe, thank you for arranging Arielle to come on. Let's do that again for sure.
Sure.
She asked in particular that I flag a slide of yours that relates to youth vaping that I want to put up here. There's so much information here. I felt like I was eating a baked Alaska with sprinkles on top. Can you help us zero in on the most important parts?
Yes. And I'll find, so what this is responding to is the point that some folks who see the world differently will say, cigarette smoking was going away among youth. And then vaping came along, and now we got this whole big other problem. And that's, it's easy to find that comment all over the place, and even still now. What my main counter argument to that is to rely on the Healthy People program, which set 10-year targets for important health behaviors and outcomes. Started, I think, in Healthy People 2000 was the first one. But there's a Healthy People 2010, there was a Healthy People 2020, there's a Healthy People 2030. And within tobacco use, high school smoking in the past 30 days was a LHI, or leading health indicator. And in 2000, they set a Healthy People 2010 goal of 16% of high school students having smoked in the last 30 days. And at that point, it was like 24%. So that was a pretty aggressive goal. Then in 2009, 2010, they had to set a Healthy People 2020 goal for high school smoking in the past 30 days. And what they picked was 16%. They couldn't even justify knocking it down a percentage point. So, and these were the folks at CDC and across NIH with all the best evidence and the best models and all the desire to wish that youth smoking was going down, and they couldn't do it in their prediction for 10 years later. So for all the people who say, why is it?
Yeah, why is that?
Why couldn't they? Because it was still like 20% when they were setting that target, 18, 19, 20%.
Yeah.
And they didn't want to set a target that they couldn't meet. Maybe their like rubric changed slightly or something.
But isn't the takeaway here that the actual numbers that resulted in the real world are far lower?
So that's it. Part of it, I'm responding more to the people whose remembering of the history is that this problem was going away and then vaping came along.
I see.
People who were at the helm did not see this problem as going away. Now, lots of things, going back to your qualms with state capacity and that sort of stuff, lots of things contributed to youth smoking going down so much. There are some who think that vaping increases youth smoking. I'm not one of those people. There are still people who hold that view. But I think what the actual evidence shows is that vaping does not decrease the decrease in youth smoking. And it's more plausible that it increases the decrease in youth smoking.
Well, I mean, take a look. Let's just go back to this is FDA's own chart. I mean, if it's true that e-cigarettes vaping leads young people to smoke, wouldn't you expect the cigarette number at the bottom there to be sharply rising?
Except these are not the same people over time. If you were looking at that, we'd want to look at what does smoking look like among young adults. Like, it's a little more complicated than like that. But to your broad point, yes, if a heavy exposure, if a widespread exposure, remember in the peak in 2019, high school vaping was almost 30%. If all those people had that risk of being pushed on to cigarettes, you would expect that there would be this increase of smoking in that cohort of people as they aged up. And that has not been observed.
That's not what happened.
It's not what happened, no.
And yet people persist in the belief that is what will happen.
And there is uncertainty around observational data that we, through the lenses and biases that operate completely unconsciously for us, we resolve in a way that favors the way we want to see the world, as do they.
Mm-hmm. All right, what was the other thing I was going to bring up here? Research flow, innovation, the youth decline, clearing the air. Yeah, give me your thoughts on Arielle's chart. I just want to go back to this real quick because again, this touches on what we're talking about here. I mean, it's this. I don't know.
Well, I will riff and do some self-promotion.
Please.
To that podcast I did with British American Tobacco's James Murphy, where he was making kind of this point, but from a global perspective, that when countries where non-combusted nicotine products have been introduced and adopted, you see faster declines of smoking in the last 15 years. And I push back a bit to say, well, lots of things were working to push down smoking. And then he made what I think is back to this point made by Beaglehole and co-authors, that the Empower program and offering non-combusted nicotine alternatives are not an or, but an and. And I then emphasize the point that in the presence of adequate substitutes, all of the Empower levers should work that much harder. A cigarette tax increase will have more potency per unit price change when there's a substitute that's readily available. So if that could be, if we could step into that, that would be a big step.
I mean, I looked at that and I've really been thinking about it a lot in the last couple of days. Beaglehole's suggestion that Empower somehow be married with harm reduction. It'd be like, I'm struggling with an analogy. It'd be like saying, if only Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was a Republican. I mean, like, have you looked at the Empower conferences? These people, it looks like the sheer devotion to coercive methods and the hostility to nicotine use of any kind is like blazing in neon. It's like, how in the wide world of sports does he expect that they're ever going to come around?
You got to be easy. Got to be easy on these people. Yeah, got to be where you got to be easy on these people.
Videos, Joe, would they sing the Empower song?
I mean, Jim, I've been in those rooms like before I was icky and not allowed to.
Do you think it's real? I mean, right? They barely tolerate your mere physical presence in the room.
And a lot of them, I can't. Well, anyway, the point.
Please, no, I'd be keen to hear this. Go ahead, tell me that. Yeah.
Here's I think Timur Kuran was the scientist who coined the term preference falsification, essentially going along to get along, and that's how you can get really rapid changes on important issues, in that people may hold beliefs that they keep private because they don't want to disturb their place in the community, but they actually hold different views. And when enough of their peers start saying, why shouldn't we have people who smoke have access to non-combusted nicotine products? All these people are like, I've been kind of thinking the same thing. Me too, me 4, me 7. And suddenly the whole room's like, let's make our policy program work even harder. Make sure we have high quality, satisfying, non-combusted alternatives because they offer what those people who smoke need at a trifle of the risk and toxicity. Let's go forth and do it. Like that could happen like that.
Joe, at the most recent, I look at, I would drink the champagne that you
golf
pop
balls
on that
waving.
day. I'll gladly share the champagne bottle you pop on the day that occurs. But if you, at the most recent gathering of those people, they were singing a song that they had created, praising M-Powers, like something out of a, I mean, again, I'm trying to be gentle with my adjectives, but it was like something you'd see in a church. I mean,
well, Jim, and Skip just made a good point, and I've tried to just put the link in that she has a paper with Lindsay Reese and Marina Murphy making the same argument. But, you know, you and I get fired up listening to the Rocky Road to Dublin, and wouldn't people who see things differently be like, can you imagine those two privileged losers getting fired up with a like shillelagh swinging song? Yeah. Like, how dare they? It's the same thing.
Well, same thing in kind, but the distinction is you and I are open to discussing alternatives. We just spent the last hour talking about different perspectives and vantage points. You and I disagree on a lot of very big and small fundamentals, and the other people, the people who are singing in the other room down the hall, they won't even let you in the room. They don't want to hear about. They never, as Arielle pointed out, they never discuss or even acknowledge the ethical concerns about their work. They don't even want to have a reasoned dialogue. That's the distinction. We're both listening to music. It's true, but we're coming at the issue in drastically different ways, in systematic ways, not philosophical, systematic ways.
I'm definitely accepting your point that having this sort of constructive disagreement would be easier. We'll be able to breathe the same air as the people who disagree with us. Completely agree. But I'm not accepting that as a fixed trait of those individuals or their communities. They're going through a very rough, censorious, exile-friendly patch. It does not need to be that way, and it can't persist. Things that can't go on don't.
So you don't.
It's just about done.
Let me press on that for a second, because I think you're touching on a really core point here. Okay. You see this as simply a phase they're going through, as opposed to the fundamental nature of their project and who they are as thinkers and policymakers.
So, and I know, Jimmy, you get so tired of me bringing up all this stuff. One important thing: there's thousands of folks who work in tobacco control around the globe, and they are not all clones made from a single like donor. They have a wide range of views, and we would do well to remember that there are some within that community who will never change, and that's fine. But I don't think it's the majority. I don't think it's even a big minority. I think it's a loud and effective, very small minority, and my hope is that they can have the joy of the purity of a very small, impotent force before too much longer.
Well, you know, our friend of the show, Noah Rothman, wrote an entire book about this called Rise of the New Puritans, in which he talks about the characteristics of our fellow Americans who embark on these sort of projects and, God help us, get in positions of control over aspects of society. And they have common features, common impulses, common notions of how to solve these problems. And I agree, they're not all identical clones, but they share a compass point, and they share an affinity for coercive methods, and they share characteristics that we can describe at large. I mean, do you reject that thesis?
Well, one, and I'm not proud of this. I haven't read Rothman's book. I've heard you tout it, and I'm sure it's well researched and powerful. I'm just unprepared to accept that everyone who wears a tobacco control label is fully explained by such a theory. I think there are lots of people within that group who would be like, oh, I just want to help people live longer, healthier lives. And if that means giving them choice of, if FDA says these are appropriate for the protection of public health, the issue is they've gotten themselves in a pickle of not prioritizing what their actual goal or goals are. They're not in a position to then negotiate what trade-offs they're prepared to accept. And we're stuck in a status quo ante that is frustrating and counterproductive.
Which just coincidentally happens to be the same status quo ante that existed in 1925 when these exact same people controlled alcohol policy.
Now, I mean, what
crazy
doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, and those aren't the only two projects. I mean, they've been doing it the entire time in countless areas of public health life. I mean, I love to flag on this show how the former FDA Commissioner Mitch Zeller once
CTP director, and you better be soft on people, Jim.
All right, I'm going to point out something. He put out a press release under his own name in which he declared his fervent wish that macaroni and cheese ought to be outlawed in America. Do you see what I'm getting at? Like, it's the same project. It's the same impulse. What's happenstance is that it's nicotine now, but this is part of a much larger. Anyway, I'm starting to do. I need my cork board with a tinfoil hat and the line and the strings.
Or like some sort of you need a pulsing lava lamp. But unfortunately, I need to run, Jim.
All right, I'm going to make you one last offer before we go. If you will promise to read Rise of the New Puritans in advance of our next show, I will read whatever single piece of literature that you think will help drop the scales from my eyes and get closer to the light, and we'll kick it around on the next show. I think you're this close. I think Noah Rothman's book might finally be the switch that gets the light bulb.
Okay. I'm a big fan of getting less wrong.
There it is. Exactly. We'll get less wrong together, Joe. We got to do it in tandem. All right. Awesome. Thanks for coming on the show in the midst of your travel, Joe. Not the first time you've joined us as a road warrior, so that's much appreciated. Thanks too for getting Arielle on the show. Lots to put in the thread. We'll continue the discussion there. And thanks to everyone for joining us. It's Jim McCarthy from American Vapor Manufacturers. Thanking Joe Gitchell, and we'll see you next time, friends.
Thanks, Jim.